Welcome to episode 221, continuing the fear series with the Imposter Syndrome. Welcome to the Be That 1% podcast. I'm your host, James Silvis, mindset specialist and performance coach. And here on the show, I'm going to challenge you to think deeper, commit to greatness, and develop a stronger mindset. You'll hear stories from those who are living life on their terms, and you'll receive strategies that will help you level up. So the question is, are you ready to be your own 1%? Let's get started. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Be That 1% podcast. If this is your first time, welcome. And if you are a return listener, welcome home. We are continuing the fear series. This will be the last episode of this fear series as we were talking about the 4 most common fears that I've seen in my experience working with, 8,000 plus people now over 10 countries. These common themes come up around fear, fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of success, and now fear of being a fraud, also known as imposter syndrome. Fear is, as we've been talking about this whole month, is so important to understand because the job is never to be fearless. Fear is helpful. Fear is essential. Fear is a part of who we are. It's all about leveraging the fear. Fear is energy, and fear is also a story. And if we can leverage that story and those feelings into action, understanding that on the other side of fear is actually more wisdom, more insight, better skill, then we can relax into the fear as opposed to tense up in the fear, allowing us to see a broader picture. If we tense up in the fear, we become survival based. And as long as we're survival based, we're not thinking at our optimal. We're not thinking of, many different vantage points. We're thinking about literally getting out of life. And that could be in a hard conversation. That could be in an actual physical altercation, wherever. That survival mode is very one-dimensional, right? And if you're a leader of an organization, a leader of your family, a leader of the community, we want to make sure that in the most pressure-filled moments, the moments where stakes are high, we're making the best choices we can make. And the only way to do that is to be able to calm our nervous systems enough to relax into that fear enough to do what needs to be done. And we can't see the whole picture when we're compromised. And that amygdala fires up when we see something in our environment that we perceive as a threat. That amygdala alarm goes off the same way that smoke detector goes off in your house when that fire comes on or the smoke comes in your house, right? That's what the amygdala does. And once the amygdala is activated, it is like divert all attention to survival, right? And the interesting thing about that is if we want to desensitize our amygdala, so that it's not so hyperactive, but it actually creates space for us to decide how we want to respond to situations rather than just being reactionary, then we need to look at mindfulness and meditation. Meditation being one of my favorite strategies. I've talked about this a lot on the podcast and brought on several experts on this alone to talk about the importance of meditation. But what meditation does is it does two really great things. One, it strengthens the corpus callosum in the brain, which is the middle of the brain, basically, that integrates the left and right hemispheres, right? Merging those two so that you can have whole brain optimization. In the West, the Western part of the world, we are more left-brained. We are more linear thinking. We are more data, science, prove it to me, right? Where the right side of the brain is more artistic, outside the box, present, emotional. A lot of times it's hard for us to place words or labels on our emotions because they're located in 2 different hemispheres. The emotions are on the right side and the language is on the left side. So the more we meditate, the more we become mindful of what we're doing, the better our brain can communicate with each side, allowing us to be better communicators, have a higher quality of life because we're not getting stuck in one or the other, and we can decide what needs to come out of us in order to maximize the situation. That's the first thing, one of my favorite things. The second thing is that it does decrease the sensitivity to your amygdala. Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning, wrote the book there, one of the most brilliant minds in modern day psychology. He's a psychiatrist in the concentration camps. And if you haven't read that book, I highly, highly recommend it. But one of his main principles was that we are stimulus response humans, right? We see something and then we respond to it. But in between that stimulus and that response is a chance for us to choose. And for those who don't train themselves, that stimulus and that response has like milliseconds, super fast. Like you don't even realize that you have a choice. You see something and then you immediately respond to it. But when you meditate and you elongate that space in between the stimulus and the response, that gives you enough time to think. Think about who I want to be. Think about what I want to do. Think about what question I want to ask. Think about how I'm going to respond from this moment forward. And that creates just enough space for us to get different results, for us to invite new opportunities into our world, right? And when we talk about these fears, those are two main things that can benefit us when we learn to calm ourselves down through meditation. And I know I'm giving you kind of a strategy to combat fear right up front without talking about the fear, but I needed to say it, and I'm just so excited when it comes to meditation because I know how much it's changed my life personally. And I think that if you can develop the discipline and the courage to start that, everything in your life gets better. I've never heard of someone say, I've done meditation for X period of time and it didn't work for me. It works to some degree for you. It's just a matter of committing yourself to it. And it's not about becoming thoughtless. It's not about going into a cave and being like a Buddhist monk. It's about quieting the mind and becoming the observer, not attaching to the thoughts that you have, realizing that the thoughts are not you. You are the selector of the thoughts. Whereas most people think that they are their thoughts. I am this because I thought it. No. You are that because you chose to think that and believe that. Right? There's a thought stream that's constantly going on in our minds, 60,000 thoughts on average. We get to select which ones we want to entertain. We even get the chance to introduce a new thought so that we can become a different version of ourselves. That's the beauty that when we take responsibility of our lives, we get to do. Right? So this is just another reminder to go out there and practice this, right? But getting into the fear of being a fraud, imposter syndrome, my guess is at some point in your life, you've gotten rewarded for a job well done, right? Maybe you've gotten promoted, or you're the first in your family to pursue a big dream or a goal, right? Or you're the minority in a field. Maybe you're in a sales environment and it's dominated by males and you're a female. Or maybe you're invited to speak at an event and you're like, well, why me? Maybe there's other people that are better than I am, right? These are all kind of examples of where this imposter syndrome can come up. And this is where you don't fully own your successes and you assume and believe that other people are more qualified to be doing what you've been tasked to do other than yourself, right? That there's other people out there that can do this way better than me. So researchers in the 1970s, psychologists Suzanne Imes, PhD, and Pauline Rose Clance founded this phenomenon, this imposter syndrome, and that it was most common amongst high achievers, and found that they are able to not internalize and accept their successes, that they often attribute their accomplishments to luck rather than to ability, and they fear that others will eventually find out that they shouldn't be where they are, that they're going to somehow unmask the truth and reveal, you don't deserve to be here. And that many people who feel like they've been imposters or feel like they are imposters grew up in families that placed a big emphasis on achievement, that you aren't someone until you're something. And so this can cause a self-doubt in yourself because this journey of succeeding never ends. You get one accolade and now you got to get another accolade. You get one house, now you got to get two houses. You get a nice car, now you got to get a nicer car. There's always levels to what you achieve. And imposter syndrome, if you don't recognize it early on, then you're never fully going to own all the things that you've created and all the success that you've accrued, right? Researchers also call this imposter syndrome intellectual self-doubt. So it's the doubt that you have about either yourself, your ability, or that you should be in the place or position that you're in. And when you look at famous people from the past, people like Maya Angelou, Natalie Portman, Ryan Reynolds, Howard Schultz of Starbucks, these people have publicly admitted to their imposter syndrome, to all the way to present day. In their latest movies or latest adventures, they've said, sometimes I feel like I don't even deserve to be here, right? And so this can trap us from not pursuing the things that we want, not taking advantage of the opportunities that are presented to us, like taking a promotion, like starting that business if we're the first to do it in our family, like going to graduate school if we feel called to do that, but no one we know has ever done that before, right? These are all callings that are coming from inside of us that are saying, go for that. But if we let this imposter syndrome control our decision-making, control who comes out of us, then we're living our life by that fear, being defined by that fear, and someone else is going to step into that opportunity that was for us, and we miss out. I've seen this time and time again in my own life and in the lives of the clients that I coach. And so my whole purpose of this episode is to really help develop the awareness around where you might be stuck in this type of thinking and how to transition out of it so that you actually live life on your terms and achieve the goals that you say you want because you want them, but also because you're willing to put the work in for them. So when you're operating in imposter syndrome, here is an example of the type of thinking that you may find yourself thinking. First, you work excessively in an attempt to prove to yourself and others that you deserve to be where you are, and leading to an endless cycle of a habit to prove, right? I got to prove myself to all of my colleagues that I deserve to be in this room. I got to prove to all my family that I deserve to be this successful. I got to prove this person wrong. And, I think a lot of people use that as motivation, and I certainly did when I was younger, but there's a shelf life to that. And I think once you get to a certain level of success, then it's no longer about proving as much as it is about sustaining. And that proving can become a toxic shift in power where you need other people to be like, damn, good job. Wow, can't believe you did that. In order to validate that we are enough, right? So this is where we start hustling for significance and worthiness, where your self-worth becomes tied to your achievements, where you define yourself by what you do and what you have. And the tricky thing with that is that is constantly in fluctuation. And so if the thing that you're defining yourself as is constantly in flux, how are you going to feel about yourself? When you're high, you're probably going to feel high, but when you're low, you're definitely going to feel low. And when we're talking about sustaining high performance or just being a leader and doing and living from a service-based mentality, we may have good or bad days, but it's all about trying to maintain that centeredness, right? And if we're defining ourselves by something that's in and out of that center constantly, then we're going to feel like we're on a roller coaster. We may take blame for mistakes that happen that aren't ours to own. We may ignore feedback that's useful for us. Instead, accept all the bad feedback because that bad constructive feedback reinforces the belief that we don't deserve to be where we're at, or that there's other people that are better than us. We can focus too much on comparison and use it to beat ourselves up and self-sabotage opportunities. This type of thinking is all classic imposter syndrome. I'll show you. I'll prove to you. I am how much money I make. I am what kind of car I drive. I am how many houses I own. Oh, this thing didn't succeed and I didn't have anything to do with it. I'll still take responsibility for it because somewhere deep down in me, I need to hear that negative feedback because it reinforces my negative view on myself and why I don't deserve to be where I'm at. Oh, and then I'll compare myself to someone else's journey that I'm nothing alike, but make me feel bad about myself, maybe even motivate myself a little bit to try and get to that level. But the trick is like once I get to that level, now that whole process starts again with another goal that I've set that's higher than my previous one. And so we get stuck in this loop, never fully appreciating the things that we've done, it never being good enough to, live, take a break, experience other things in life. And we become obsessed in one area that, may wreak havoc in other areas of our lives. And so with any fear, it's not so much about eliminating it as much as it is about understanding it and shifting the energy of it. Right? So what does that mean? How can we shift this imposter syndrome to something that's useful? Well, that's where we're going to get tactical, right? If I'm constantly proving myself to others, really, I'm trying to prove it to myself. I need the validation from others in order to temporarily feel that I am enough. And I just need that extra validation in order for me to believe it in myself. But if we take that external component out of it, right, outsourcing our power to someone else's opinion and put that emphasis on us by figuring out what's important to us, what we stand for, how we define success, and realize that we're actually living the thing that we've always wanted, that maybe we're actually successful, but we've never acknowledged that. Oh man, how big of a game changer would that be? It'd be massive. I know so many people that don't view themselves as successful that I've worked with and helped them understand that they are successful, and they have felt a huge weight be lifted off their shoulders, so much that tears have came out of their eyes because for the first time in their life, they've actually taken a time to understand all the things that they've done and recognize themselves for that and give themselves the appropriate love and respect for all the work and sacrifice that they've put in. And from that place, they build more sustainably. That it's no longer fueled about insecurity. It's now fueled by love and service. That they've hit their own needs. They've taken care of themselves, and now it becomes bigger than them and about how they can serve other people. And that is hard to derail. That is hard to stop once that train gets in motion. But you can't get there unless you stop and reflect on what you've done, who you've become, and how what you're doing is in alignment with who you want to be. And that alignment creates precision, and people feel that. So much so that when you walk into the room, they get that vibe. You don't have to say anything. It's all in your energy. It's all in what you're bringing to the environment because of how you're thinking. And when you take your power back, not needing the validation from other people, now you start living by your own expression, not a controlled or watered down version of you because you don't want to upset people or you don't want to ruffle feathers. Now it's more like, what would I do in this situation? And how many of you have asked yourself that question as opposed to what would someone else do? What would I do? What would I think in this situation? What am I choosing to do in this situation? Yeah, maybe I have friends or people in my corner that can help me see things, but ultimately, this is my choice. This is my decision. And when you take ownership of that, when you live in that space, life becomes really fun because you're the creator of the thing that you're building intentionally, not by default. So you appreciate that journey more. And it's not so much about the outcome anymore, as much as it is about the process and the person that you're becoming along the way. Shifting away from hustling for significance. Oh man, I worked 80 hours this week. Okay, great. But what else suffered because of that, right? And if your values are based in relationships with your family and you're spending 80 hours a week at work, there is a disconnect there. We got to figure out how to shift some things in your work, systematize, do things differently that help you free up space and time to devote your energy and your resources to the areas that you deem important. Another reason why values is so important. Another reason why your definition is important. This is a big reason why I created my course, my self-awareness course for leaders, because I kept seeing these patterns. They didn't have answers to these fundamental questions, or they didn't have any frameworks in which to live their life by. And so they just kept winging it. And if you keep winging it, that's going to create unnecessary stress because you don't have any solid framework or solid wisdom that you can ground yourself in. And that groundedness is what allows you to slow things down, to look at things in a different light, to see it in a different way. And when you can see it clearly, you can move clearly, right? And the comparison thing, I'm going to make a whole separate episode on comparison, so stay tuned for that. But really, I don't think people compare themselves enough to who they were yesterday. And I think that's the winning formula is, am I better than yesterday? By 1%, 5%, 10%, doesn't matter. Am I better than yesterday? Yes? Amazing. Keep that up. No? How come? Not judging myself for not doing so, but really getting curious. Why is that? With 8 hours in a day, roughly, that someone would put towards work, how come I didn't improve in that area? What was the reason? I figure out that reason, I improve again, I'm back on track. Sometimes we get in this judgment shame cycle where we're like, oh, of course you didn't succeed. Of course you didn't do this. Oh, I can't believe you didn't do that. And it's like that perpetuates the same emotional state that allows us not to take action. It's really just catching ourselves in these moments, right? And really being mindful. Going back to the beginning of this episode, meditation and mindfulness, being aware of what we're thinking, aware of what we're doing without judgment, being the observer. I noticed that James is in a pattern right now. I've seen this pattern before. It's going to lead to him saying no to that opportunity as opposed to yes. Now that I'm aware that I'm seeing that, I can make an adjustment. And because I made that adjustment, I don't fall into the same pattern, which means I don't have the same result. I have a better result. And that's ultimately how we shift. So as we close out this episode, some things I'd ask for you to do is really just define your values, get clear on your definition of success, understand that fear is not bad, that fear is an essential piece of life, and it's all about how we shift our thinking when we feel that fear, honoring the fear, but then shifting it, right? And then practicing some form of meditation or mindfulness, whether that's taking a walk in nature without any headphones, or that's sitting in silence for 10 to 15 minutes on your couch before your day starts, or maybe even at lunch, or if that's some form of journaling to get your thoughts out so that you see them on paper so they're not just circling your head all the time, keeping you stuck in a loop that you don't want to be in. Really just getting curious around why you think the things that you do without judgment. Key point there, all right? So we all experience these fears. We're all human, and we all have goals that we want to get. And so in order to achieve those goals, one of the things that we have to be aware of is our emotional state, and that's where fear comes in. We've got to be able to understand this and pick up on it. Otherwise, it's going to seamlessly just seep into our life, and we're going to find ourselves in the same situations that we don't want to be in. And as a leader, we don't have that luxury, right? So we got to be able to go deep, to learn, to grow, to share, and ultimately to serve. And the best way to serve is to serve ourselves first so we can hold that space, so we know what questions to ask, so we know what kind of space to hold, so we know how to activate empathy and compassion while also challenging ourselves and others to go forward and move onward. All right. So again, thank you for listening to this Fear series. If anyone that you know needs to hear this message, give this episode to them. Send it to them right now. Say, hey, I know you've been talking about this. We had a conversation around this. I think this will help. Give this to them. That's my purpose. That's why I create episodes like this. I appreciate you guys listening and DMing me and sharing this on your socials. It means the world to me. Leaving reviews, and I've just helped me get this message out to more people. I know how much I've suffered with this stuff, and I know how much my clients do, and I don't want people to suffer unnecessarily for things that they want, right? We can make the change through small little shifts, and it starts with the level of awareness. And this is building that awareness and giving you tactical tools on how to leverage it, how to do something about it. All right? So go out there, be your own 1%, and I'll talk to you guys next time.